Welcome everybody. So today we're going to be talking about naming molecular compounds. Molecular compounds is another way to refer to covalent compounds. So today we're naming covalent compounds. So molecular compounds are compounds made up of molecules whose atoms are covalently bonded. Okay, so like I was saying, molecular compounds is just another way to say covalent compounds. And of course, since they're covalent compounds, they're going to be made of nonmetals bonded together. Of course, we know that that sometimes can include metalloids, but usually it's going to be groups of nonmetals that are bonded together. And we're talking about naming molecular compounds that contain two elements. So these are going to be binary molecular compounds. Some of the larger organic compounds that contain several elements, we're not going to go into that nomenclature, but we are going to talk about how to name binary covalent compounds. Okay, so the first rule, pretty easy. The element furthest to the left goes first in the formula and in the name. Okay, so let's say that I had a compound and it contained oxygen and nitrogen. So since nitrogen is further to the left on the periodic table, nitrogen would be the first element in the formula, and it would also be the first element in the name. So it would be a nitrogen oxide compound. Now, if both elements are in the same family or group, so if they're in the same column on the periodic table, the element further down in the group, so the one further towards the bottom of the periodic table, is going to go first. So a good example of this, if I had a compound that contains sulfur and oxygen, since sulfur is further down on the periodic table, sulfur would go first in the formula and in the name. Okay, so the last thing is that the end of the second element's name is changed to IDE at the end. So we did that whenever we did ionic compounds as well. So you're just going to name the first element, and then you're going to name the second element, but change the ending of that element's name to IDE, okay? The last rule is that since covalent compounds are not based on charge, since there's no set number of atoms that have to be covalently bonded to each other, they can bond in different ways, Greek prefixes are used to indicate the number of each element present in the chemical formula for the compound, okay? So for example, if I only had one element or one atom of the element in the compound, I would use the prefix mono. 2 atoms of that element, it's gonna be di, like dioxide. So you've heard of carbon monoxide, that's carbon with 1 oxygen. And then you've heard of carbon dioxide, that's carbon with 2 oxygens. Tri is 3. Tetra is 4. Penta is 5. Hexa is 6, like a hexagon. Hepta is 7. Octa is 8, nona is 9, and deca, like a decade, is 10, okay? Very rarely do we use some of these larger ones, but you are going to use some of the smaller ones quite frequently. Okay, so a quick note about mono. The mono prefix is used on, so it's always used on the second element, but is never used for the first element. So for example, like I was saying, you've heard of carbon monoxide, you've heard of carbon dioxide. Now each of those contains 1 carbon at the beginning, but we don't call it monocarbon monoxide. We don't say that. Instead, what we do is we just, if there's 1 carbon at the beginning, we just name that element. However, if I had something like this, if I had 2 nitrogens as the first element in the compound, it would be dinitrogen monoxide, Okay, but this is not going to be monocarbon monoxide. This is not going to be monocarbon dioxide. It's just simply carbon dioxide. Also, if I had NO2, this would be nitrogen dioxide. This would not be mononitrogen dioxide. So we do use all of the other prefixes, so di, tri, tetra, penta. We will use those on the first element. So again, this would be dinitrogen monoxide. I would indicate that there are two nitrogens. We just don't use the mono prefix on the very first element if there's only one of that element, okay? We do use the mono prefix on the second element if there's only one of those. So a couple of examples from the worksheet. Pretty easy stuff today. For the first one, you have P2O5. So that's 2 phosphorus. And again, the prefix for 2 is di. So this is going to be diphosphorus. And then we have 5 oxygens in this compound. And so the prefix for 5 is penta. So this is going to be pentoxide. We're going to change the ending to IDE. Now, frequently we'll take the A off if the name of the element starts with a vowel. So it's not going to be pentaoxide, it's just pentoxide. So just be aware you don't want those two vowels to run together quite frequently. Okay, so the second one, we have 1 sulfur and 2 oxygens. Again, since I have 1 sulfur, but it's the first element, I'm just going to name the element. It's not going to be monosulfur, it's just sulfur. And then I have 2 oxygens here. I do need to indicate that there are 2 oxygens, so I'm going to use the prefix for 2, which is di. So this is sulfur dioxide. Okay, and down at the bottom, formula writing is just as easy. I see silicon dioxide. Now, they didn't put a prefix on silicon, which means that I only have one of them since it's the first element. So it's just going to be Si. And then dioxide means 2 oxygens, so O subscript 2. Next one says diboron tetrabromide. So di means 2, so I have 2 borons. And then tetra is the prefix for 4, so that means that I have bromine 4 times in this compound. Okay, so you guys need to finish this worksheet and name those molecular compounds.